Hello everyone. In this lesson we are going to understand what is HTTP protocol, what is HTTP request, what is HTTP response, and what is the HTTP request format and the HTTP response format. So this technical knowledge is required for understanding for the topics in clear and also for some advanced topics too. So first, what is HTTP? HTTP is a protocol that defines set of rules to send the request from the browser to server and get the response from server to browser. So here we have the browser or client, and on the opposite side we have the server. Inside the server we have some MVC application running. Now HTTP acts as a tunnel through which the browser can send request and the server can provide the response as a result. But the pattern of HTTP is on sending a request only response will come. The server itself cannot provide any information to the browser on its own. Upon sending a request only response will come back. So this is the HTTP protocol. So in the HTTP protocol we have two things, request and response. For every request there will be some certain format that is called HTTP request message format. And in this request message format, three parts are available: request start line, request headers, and request body. Request headers and request body is separated with a empty line, blank line. Here in the first place we have to place, in the first start line we have to place HTTP method. This method can be either get or post. The difference between get and post I will explain later in this next slide. After the space we have to enter the URL to which URL you want to send your request. Again space, we have to mention HTTP 1.1, that is the version number of your HTTP. Now the request headers are the key value pairs that can be sent from the browser to server. Empty line is the separation between request headers and request body. Request body may contain actual information that you want to send from browser to server. Now let us understand HTTP methods. Here HTTP request can be of two types, get and post. Get is used for retrieving data from server. For example, you want to retrieve some set of mails from the server to browser in Gmail. So here we are not updating any data, we are not inserting any data, but we are just retrieving data from server. So that is an example of get. Similarly, suppose in Facebook, once we click on any post such as photo or video, right side it will show the list of comments. So retrieving comments from the server, that is also an example of get. But on the opposite side, post is representing insert, update and delete operations. You want to add the new comment, you want to delete existing comment, you want to modify existing comment in Facebook. These are examples of post request because you are trying to modify the data at that time. In case of get request, parameters will be appended to the URL as a query string in this format. See, after HTTP localhost :port number, question mark is the starting point of the query string, followed by parameter name equal to value, again parameter name equal to value, and so on. This ampersand symbol is a separator between each parameter, and parameters should not have any spaces. Overall URL should not have space. And these parameters will be displayed in the address bar of the browser. But in case of post request, the parameters are not displayed in the URL but will be sent in the request body. See, come back here. Here this body content will be used only in case of post request. This will be empty in case of get request. So for example, I want to submit my username and password. So in case of get request, the username and passwords are present in the query string as a part of the URL. But in case of POST request, the same username and password will be sent as a request body instead of adding it in the URL. And in case of POST request, the parameters are not visible in the address bar of the browser because they are sent in hidden format inside the request message body, not in the URL. The GET request can pass limited number of characters only because the maximum number of characters per URL is 255 characters. Actually, there are some browsers that supports unlimited number of characters such as Google Chrome, but we don't suggest lengthy URLs because it may not work in all the browsers, maybe some old versions of the browsers. So it is better to stick up to 255 characters, not increasing more than that. So GET has a limit of amount of data that it can send to server. But in case of POST, there is no such a limit. We can send unlimited data to server because the parameters data will be added to the request body, not in the URL. So no limits applicable for the request body. GET is faster than POST. POST is slower than GET. Because in case of POST, some additional process needs to be done in the browser memory. And GET can send ASCII characters only, POST can send Unicode characters. So you will be able to send any language characters. So this is the comparison of GET and POST. And also we are discussing about request headers. The request headers are the key value pairs that can be sent from the browser to server for content negotiation. For example, browser indicates its browser name and the client IP address, the client operating system name. All these details will be informed as request headers to server. So here some of the examples of request headers I mentioned. There are so many actually, few of them I have mentioned here. For example, accept indicates MIME type of the request. So whether you want to accept a plain text or HTML text or CSS text, etc. Accept language indicates what language of content you want to accept, either English language or any other worldwide language. Connection means how the connection should be maintained, either open or closed. The server has to close the connection immediately as soon as the response is sent, or connection should be opened. So we can say keep alive, or we can say closed. Cookie indicates cookies that can be sent from the browser to server. Cookies actually will be stored in the browser memory, but we can submit the cookies to server. Content length is the length of your request body. This will be 0 in case of GET request. This will be set to appropriate number of characters depending on the data that you are sending. Content type indicates MIME type of the request body. What kind of content that you are sending from browser to server, that MIME type is represented as a content type. The default content type for the request body is, in case of POST request, text/x www form URL encoded. This will be used only for POST request but not for GET request. Date indicates date and time of the request. Host indicates server domain name, that is www.somewebsitename.com. User agent indicates the current working browser details from which the request is made originally. These are some of the examples of request headers. You are able to notice all the request headers practically here. For example, we have just opened Firefox browser. Right click on the web page, inspect element, go to network and enter the URL www.google.com. See, my browser has sent these many requests to server. And if you take any one of them, for example this one, So here you can see two types of requests, two types of headers, response headers and request headers. Response headers are sent from server to browser, so we will talk about them later. But now request headers are the headers that are sent from browser to server. So here you can see accept encoding, cache control, connection, cookie, like we can see several key value pairs. All these request headers have been sent from browser to server. Now we are discussing about HTTP response message format. It starts with HTTP version number, that is HTTP/1.1. It's a constant, we don't change this. But after that, status code, status description we can provide. Status code indicates status of the process, whether the request is successfully processed or failure. In case of failure, why it is failure. For that, status code represents a number. Status description will be corresponding description of the specific status code. And response headers are the key value pairs that are sent from server to browser. And response body will contain the actual response that is sent from server to browser. And the response headers and the response body is separated with empty line. Here you must place an empty line. So here we have given some of the response headers. Okay, these are the some of the response headers that we can send from server to browser. And now we can see HTTP MIME types. Here MIME type means type of the content that we can send from server to browser. Text by plain representing some plain text. Text by HTML represents some set of HTML tags. Text by CSS represents some CSS code. Text by JavaScript is representing some JavaScript code. And I think others you can understand. Suppose JSON data we can represent as application by JSON. XML data is a text by XML. And images, audio, video also you are able to identify. HTTP status code is representing a number for a meaningful kind of response to the browser. For example, 100 indicates continue, 200 indicates successfully data processed and the response has been given to browser. 302 indicates redirection from one URL to another URL. 304 indicates not modified. That means the content already cached in the browser memory, so we need not send the content freshly from the server. 400 indicates bad request. That means the sufficient data is not passed from server to browser, or request message format is having bad format. 401 indicates unauthorized, means the user is not having proper rights to access the content. 404, that is not found, that is URL is wrong, or the URL routing is not done properly. 500 indicates internal server error. That means the URL is correct, but while executing the code on the server, there is some runtime exception. These are some of the status code that we will see frequently. There are many other actually, but any number starting with 1 is indicating informational. Any number that starts with 2, that is a success. Any number that starts with 3, that is redirection. Any number that starts with 4, that is a client-side error. Any number that starts with 500 is a server-side error. So we have understood the HTTP request and response message format, and in the next class we will continue.